Hello everyone, welcome to the third of the Save Your Wardrobe sessions today on November 26th, 2020, in week 3 of the UK lockdown and the day before the dreaded Black Friday, a day designed to make us shop for things we probably don't need. In our first session a couple of weeks ago, we explored with Hasna Kourda, the founder of Save Your Wardrobe, and Fashion Revolution co-founder Ursula de Castro, how to begin to think yourself out of being a consumer and to start thinking like a citizen. It was a very lively discussion that ultimately led us back to encouraging everyone to disengage from the noise of the fashion industry, encouraging that fashion fix, and to take responsibility for our choices in the way we use and care for our clothes. Last week, we met Professor Dr. Kate Fletcher, who, with her extensive work in the field of sustainability and fashion, knows exactly how we need to act differently to become fashion citizens. This week, we have our millennial correspondent and the perspective of the author and journalist Lauren Bravo, who is no stranger to the addiction of fast fashion and indeed is our reporter from the front line of the problem, having been part of it all herself. The night before Lauren gave up buying clothes for a year, she panic bought 5 dresses and sent back 4. In her 20s, she spent much time creating fashion galleries for trends and magazine websites, things we needed to buy now, even trends to buy before you liked them. Hopefully, Lauren and Hasna will be able to help you understand how to break up with fast fashion. And so, having accepted that we have to change, today we're looking at exactly that, how to break up with fast fashion, and tied in with step 2 in our 12-step program, how to change your habits and change the world. The session will last an hour, so let's get started. My name is Melanie Rickey, and I'm a fashion journalist passionate about sharing the message to those still engaging with fast fashion and throwaway culture, that we need to make a radical change and become users of clothes rather than buyers and discarders. And we have to start right now. So with us today, we have Hasna, founder of Save Your Wardrobe, the tech startup that allows you to keep your wardrobe in your pocket, enabling connection to services that help citizens make more conscious choices and get huge and stylish satisfaction from using up their clothes. Hasna will share her inspiration for founding Save Your Wardrobe and how, by utilizing the tools in the app and the app's super users, how they're changing their ways by following the 12 steps. Lauren and Hasna will also be sharing with us how they broke up with fast fashion and how to avoid Black Friday. After we hear from them both, we invite you to join in. You can go to participants and the raise hand button to ask questions and share your own stories about how you would like to make change. So welcome everyone again, and we'll start talking with Hasna. Hello Hasna, how are you?
Hi, I can see familiar faces. Welcome back.
We were chatting earlier this morning about your youthful experiences of fast fashion. And we can safely say that Hasna is not someone who's had many interactions with it at all. We'd like to hear your perspective on what you think of it and how it appeared to you when you first came across it, and a little bit about Save Your Wardrobe.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was actually, we were talking about Levi's just before this call, and I remember growing up having in mind like Levi's was a super sturdy brand that was made to face the challenges of lives, and was there because the story was to dress workers, and so for me, when I discovered that Levi's was a fast fashion brand, I was really surprised and shocked, because I thought this can't be true. But yeah, for fast fashion, my first encounter, I guess, was when companies like Carrefour entered the UK market, the Tunisian market, sorry, and started to kind of kill slowly the local markets and local fashion boutiques. And then when I arrived in France and saw the trends popping and people shopping, window shopping, going from store to another, and also my sister, who was older than me, loved also to look at new styles, and not that she was shopping there, but she wanted to discover and she wanted to go. So that's my first encounter with fast fashion about 20 years ago. And also something that fascinated me back then was the rise of ASOS, and it was as seen on then, and using celebrity faces to kind of copycat their dresses. And then I remember then they used to work on the fear of missing out and very small stock. So that's actually not really from a consumer point of view, but from someone who wasn't really into that type of consumerism. Was my observation of the industry.
Wonderful. And what about when you first came to London? Did you have a similar experience?
Yeah, so that was actually much older. So it was one of my first experiences in London, and I have so a luxury brand opened their flagship store in London, and it was really at the beginning, and a lady, very wealthy lady, came. So the price range of the product used that was sold were around 300, 400 pounds. And I remember she came with her daughter a first day, and basically they bought the whole store and left with a bill of about 8 or 9 thousand pounds. And then the lady came back the 2 days later, and she was picking the same things again. And so I told her, why are you picking these things? Is it for you? Is it for a friend? Is it for your daughter? Because you picked them 2 days ago. And she said, did I? I completely forgot. I didn't even open my bags. So the lady spent 8,000 pounds. And she completely forgot about 8,000 pounds. Obviously, she's wealthy and good for her. But that's when I thought this thing is going out of control, and really I need to find a solution. And that's what triggered Save Your Wardrobe, to make me really think about a solution and deep dive into the problem. So yeah, it was the thing as well about this lady was even more fascinating is that she came back at the end of the week before leaving, because she didn't live in London, and she asked me if we had new things that she can buy. So that retail therapy wasn't working for her at all. And I was really surprised. She was really lovely, and obviously I didn't sell her anything, and she left a little bit sad and went to Stella McCartney, which was a neighbor. To so I think my boss didn't really like that.
Yeah. You could have sold triple the amount of the same things to the
Yeah.
same person. But it does really highlight the madness, and it's something we'll talk about with Lauren in a little while. And your twist of the mind there, where you thought, okay, how can I find that solution? How long did it take you to get there from that moment? And how did it take? Was developing a long time?
As soon as she left, I borrowed the computer, the main computer of the store, and I started my research. As soon as she left, I was, this is crazy. This can't go on. And I remember I called even my husband and told him this crazy story. And this has to be solved. This has to be rethought. This industry has to wake up to the way it works. And even if she didn't come back to the store, she would have gone online and bought things online. So it wasn't just a matter of going back to a store or buying the same things. Is that the need for accumulating, or for that kind of hormonal fix at some point, is what I feel like is problematic.
It's very true. So now that you've got the app up and running and you've got your users, and I love hearing the stories about them, because there's such a variety of different kinds of people who are making use of your services. And there's the gentleman who collects army things, or was in the army. There's all sorts. Can you tell me some of the stories of people and how they are changing? Because I love hearing them.
So we have an ongoing partnership with the University of Glasgow, where actually in 2018, we've started to follow our beta testers into how they manage traditionally their wardrobe with no digital tool, and how do they make repairs, how often they buy, would they go for fast fashion, would they go for a more thoughtful process of consumption. And we've realized that this first batch of beta testers were overwhelmed by the massive amount of things that they bought in the past, and it was actually triggering a kind of anxiety about their consumption, and they didn't feel well. They felt guilty of having too many things overflowing, and also it felt like physically overwhelming again. And then we reconducted the research once the app was live with actual users of the app. So a complete random choice of people who wanted to sign up for the research. And the keywords that are coming, that are highlighted, is more of the feeling of bringing back joy to their wardrobe. And even though it's not really the Marie Kondo way, it's exploring and taking that reflective exercise on what they have and how to put love back in their wardrobe. So these words were from one of the quotes of our users. And I love the fact that the tool have helped them realize that some things that they had in the past are worth loving again. And whether it's through wearing them or repairing them or just acknowledging that they bought them for a certain reason, that's also something that Save Your Wardrobe is extremely passionate about. So I'm really glad. And then we can also go into how the first research highlighted kind of compulsive habits of buying something because they are seeing it and either online or in the store, and they want to have it straight away. And the new keywords that are highlighted in this second research, which are planning, hunting, so waiting for something, and accepting to not succumb for the urge of purchasing something straight away. So that's also something that is fascinating. And then the highlights of the repairs ecosystem, even though they are not requesting those services straight away, the fact that they are there as an option is also, there is a kind of feel of calmness or an alternative to buying new.
Yeah, I can really relate to all of those things. I can see Lauren nodding away and having, reread her book this week in preparation for this. You're touching on all of many of the points that she picks up on. I have to say, I've been doing my shoes and bags to the app this week, and I found a Fendi bag that I'm now going to be getting repaired. So it is exciting, and it does give you a sense of calmness. And it made me think, when you were talking about hunting, it's that idea that we've been gorging for so long on fashion that we feel sick, and actually now we're taking a step back from it. And it's the idea of hunting, as in hunter-gatherers used to gorge on things when they found them in case they were eaten by other beings or other animals. So it's kind of like quite primal, the way that we've been acting around clothes. So the thing we also ended on Hasna, before we talked with Lauren, was this stop talking, start acting idea.
Yeah, exactly. So that's also something that is driven by younger generation in our platform. So we've got a lot of feedback on, okay, now I'm really excited to starting this activist journey through my wardrobe. What can I do more? And how can I engage outside of the app and join an activist movement or something that would have a larger impact? Or maybe a collective impact. So this is also something that I'm really excited to see, that even though it looks like an app and a community-based app, the fact that it urges people to go outside, even though it's not safe outside, but it going out of the building and meeting with people that can empower this movement. So yeah, I'm extremely excited to see that in the younger generation, and also maybe because they are facing again the back to the hunting and the animal instincts. So we are all facing this climate emergency, and it I feel like it brings back this feel of going back to safety, and going back to safety is not by accumulating, it's by actually stripping to the minimum, and so that you can be agile on how you react to things. And I feel like this is also something that was highlighted by some of the generation who also wants to support local and small designers, to make sure that that their pennies are worth are spent in a worthwhile cause.
Thank you. That's really, really interesting, and it's great to hear of the activism that's taking place and that seeking to know more. Okay, thank you, Hasna. Now we'll go over to Lauren, and we'll hear from Lauren Bravo, who is an author, journalist, and pop culture queen who writes about fashion, food, design, feminism, and travel, among many other things. Her book, How to Break Up with Fast Fashion, is a handbook for our times, and it's front and center on my shelf and the Save Your Wardrobe shelf. It's been by my side all week, and I've really loved reading Lauren's journey away from fashion addiction to a happier, slower enjoyment of her own personal style. So welcome to you, Lauren, and thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, hi, Melanie. Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here. And that glowing introduction, so nice.
Well, you're glowing, so we definitely give glowing introductions. Lovely. Now, we were discussing things a bit earlier today, weren't we? And you didn't actually know you were setting out to write How to Break Up with Fast Fashion. You just really wanted to break up with it.
I did. And in fact, I didn't even tell anybody what I was doing at first, because I decided I was so worried I would fail that I didn't even want to turn it into content. So I decided at the beginning of 2019, well, decided just before that I was going to not buy anything brand new for a whole year. And that was, I guess it was the culmination of like a bit of a journey that I'd been on over the kind of preceding few years, where I realized that I was, my fashion habits just weren't making me happy anymore. I realized that I was shopping far too much. I was giving so much time and energy to the constant pursuit of newness. You know, I had this eternal list in my head of things that I needed. And it was, I kind of always liken it to being on an everlasting treadmill, in that, you know, you tell yourself, well, once I get that jacket, then I'll be done. And then you get the jacket and you go, yeah, but now I need the shoes to go with the jacket. And once I get those, then I'll be done. I was just constantly thinking about clothes, taking things back, standing in the post office queue with all my ASOS returns. And so I had decided that I wanted to change my habits. I started buying less and less on the high street. I started buying more secondhand. I started volunteering in a charity shop, which was, you know, a massive thing for me, because I think I really then started to appreciate where a lot of those fashion fixes are ending up. And I started gradually sort of reining in my habits. And of course, at the same time, as a fashion writer, I was starting to read more and more about the toxic underside of the fashion industry. So I was learning more about the environmental impact. I was watching documentaries like The True Cost. I was starting to understand a lot more about just how bad the humanitarian crimes are. You know, I think it's still hard for us to get our head around the fact that less than 2% of garment workers earn a living wage. And so, of course, I was taking a lot of stuff that, you know, once you read that stuff and you hear it, it's quite hard to go back. But I was still probably shopping too much. And so, yeah, it all kind of came to a head when I moved house at the end of 2018. I was going through decades worth of fashion mistakes. I was just finding things in my wardrobe that I'd forgotten I even owned, stuff that I was pulling out and saying, well, this is perfectly nice, why don't I wear this? And it was just because I'd forgotten I had it. Things that I'd forgotten even buying. I was just confronted with the sheer scale, really, of my wardrobe. So I realised that I probably could, I mean, as you were saying, with that idea of gorging, I realised that I had probably taken in the equivalent calories of, you know, at least a year's worth of fashion consumption. I didn't need to buy any more. So challenged myself to give up for a year. I said, right, I can buy the odd bit of secondhand, but nothing brand new, nothing at all. But yeah, as I said, I wasn't sure I could do it. So I didn't tell anybody. I wasn't planning to write about it. I wasn't going to turn it into content. And then my friend Daisy started doing it with me. She came up with a good hashtag, put a couple of Instagram posts out. And then about 3 months into that challenge, I got asked to write the book. So it all snowballed quite quickly.
Absolutely, yeah, that's brilliant. Your hashtag was not New Year.
Hashtag not New Year, that's it, yes.
Excellent. And so yeah, you started off quietly, sort of in an ashamed corner, and then it turned into something that set you a real challenge for the year. Because once you start something like that, you really, and it's out there, you can't really go back.
Yeah, I mean, I always joke that, you know, there is no better way to make sure you stick to your New Year's resolution than having to write a book about it, which obviously isn't an option that's freely available to everybody, but it really made sure that, you know, I had made my bed and I had to lie in it. So I then threw myself into, you know, spending that year really, immersing myself in the world of sustainable fashion. I was researching loads. I was learning so much that I didn't know, and I still am. You know, I mean, that was 18 months ago, and still every week I'm reading a new stat that shocks me, or, you know, discovering a really cool new brand that's doing something really innovative. Save Your Wardrobe obviously being a great example of that. And it's changing so quickly, but yeah, I'm really glad that I did make that break when I did.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about what led you to making the break, because we discussed earlier on, like, you were very much bought into the whole fashion will make me happy, this is great, yeah, you know, scroll by, you know, and also of course the journalism side of it. Can you give us a kind of snapshot of you in your sort of active fast fashion addiction?
Yes, oh my god, I mean, it makes me cringe when I think back about it, but then at the same time I think it's useful to get this stuff off my chest, because that hopefully helps other people feel less guilty and realize that everybody starts somewhere, you know, and I have definitely not been a sort of saintly eco-activist all of my life. So the best example I can give is I worked, until I went completely self-employed, I often worked around central London, which meant that when I wanted to pop to the shops, my version of the shops was Oxford Street. So, you know, one of the world's premier shopping streets, you just have such an abundance of choice. And I would end up on Oxford Street, I would say at least 3 times a week, often more. And it would be that classic thing where I would text my boyfriend and say, oh, I'll be home for dinner. I'm just gonna nip to John Lewis because I need to get a birthday present or something like that. And then 3 hours would go by, and he would check Find My Friends, and he would see my little dot was still just kind of pinballing around Oxford Street. And I would fall into these holes of thinking, just one more shop. You know, it was always, okay, well, I've exhausted 3 branches of H&M, but just one more, you know, just in case they've got that perfect life-changing dress. And that sounds really hyperbolic, but honestly, I think at my absolute worst, I really believed that the right outfit could change my life. I really thought that the right outfit would make me the better version of myself, you know, and I think there was so much of my own identity, my own self-worth was really tied up in what I wore. And it kind of still is, you know. I think clothes can be an amazing tool for self-expression. I think they can be a really positive thing. I think for a lot of people they are the way that we express ourselves, that we kind of form identities, and they're a very creative thing. And I always loved them growing up as well. You know, I was obsessed with designing fashion kind of outfits, and I always made little outfits for my Barbies and stuff. But I grew up wearing clothes from charity shops a lot of the time. You know, we wore a lot of secondhand, and my mum's quite crafty and would make things. In my teens, I wore a lot of vintage. So it wasn't really until my 20s that I fully succumbed, I think, to that addictive mindset. And it was manic. And I would end up sort of, you know, before I went to a wedding or something, I would convince myself that I couldn't wear an outfit I'd already worn. And so I had to run to the shops. And I, too many times to admit, I would be in Topshop as they were closing the doors. You know, I would still be kind of scrabbling around, just like, quick, just give me anything, give me the clutch bag, a jacket, something that gives me that little fix. So only looking back now and telling those stories, I think, am I realizing the full extent of that addiction, just how ridiculous that sounds now. But at the time it felt normal.
Yeah, exactly. And we talked about the democratization of fashion,
Yeah.
and also internalized culture that the media teaches us, that mindset you had was a mindset that was prevalent in the media, and a sort of an ongoing conversation in the public arena. But you weren't thinking this alone. It was an internalized thing that you've been taught somehow through your growing up.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I'd been reading magazines, you know, the kind of language that we internalize, those phrases like must-haves, those articles, you know, 12 kind of coats from Zara that you need to have this season, that kind of absolute, you know, consumerist messaging we are taking in all the time without even realizing it. It's everywhere. And I think particularly working in the media, so obviously I was, at the same time that I was kind of, you know, fulfilling that consumer end of the bargain, I was also the person perpetuating it, because I was writing articles around, as you mentioned earlier, this is probably my most shameful moment, but at the time I thought it was genius. I wrote an article a few years ago that was about why it makes sense to buy trends before you are even sure that you like them. Because I rationalized that so often it takes you a while to come around to the idea of a trend. And then by the time you decide that you want it, it's almost over. So it makes sense to buy things while they still seem a bit ugly. And I mean, I'm cringing so hard even saying that now, because it's just ludicrous. But that was, even 5 years ago, you know, that was a totally logical thing to write, because we all engaged with trends kind of almost without even pausing to question why or whether it was okay to opt out. And I really did feel, even before kind of Instagram really took over, I really still felt like I had to be perpetually debuting these kind of new outfits to feel fresh and relevant. And, you know, I think spending a lot of time in central London doesn't help with that either, because it's like being in a constant kind of catwalk. But yeah, that's how it went.
Yeah, and also, of course, working in fashion, you're around a lot of other people who are doing the same thing. You know, and it's kind of a clubby culture. So so let's go back to the beginning of your year. So you had to, well, one of the things you talk about is, of course, working in a charity shop, and the other thing was kind of your self-talk around clothes and how that changed. Did those two things, the charity shop and the self-talk, did they sort of evolve together?
I guess so. Yeah, I think they probably did. So, I mean, I've been volunteering in the charity shop now for 2.5, nearly 3 years. And it was so interesting, I think, seeing the end of that life cycle. I mean, not that it's not the end, it shouldn't be the end, but seeing where so many of those fast fashion bargains end up. And of course, we know, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people will have read that we have a massive problem in this country with charity shops being completely flooded with donations. You know, they are overwhelmed with clothes that often are not even in good enough nick to sell. Also, what happens is a lot of our donations end up then being shipped overseas, and there's a real problem in countries like Kenya and Ghana, where they're sort of stifling those local economies because we just have too many clothes. So I think the first thing I realized was, it's not enough just to donate to charity shops and think that that is doing a good deed. You need to be prepared to buy from charity shops as well. You know, we have to sign up for both ends of the deal. And I also was really struck by just how many clothes we were getting in that still had tags on.
Wow.
You know, just such an obvious visual indicator of the kind of place that we're at with our shopping habits. So many clothes with tags still on, so many clothes that I recognised as having been on the high street 6 months ago, less than that even. And it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because of course these days when people are maybe a little bit squeamish about secondhand, I always say to them, well, the thing is, so many clothes in charity shops have barely even been worn. You know, so many of them are completely unworn. That's obviously a really sad it's sad evidence of where we're at, but it also means that hopefully for people who are a little bit more squeamish about secondhand, it's kind of a good route in. But yeah, so I think that definitely helped kind of change my mindset. I think actually, if it doesn't sound too saccharine, I think taking myself just out of that ridiculous kind of fashion media bubble, and seeing a slightly more kind of, you know, diverse intersection of life that you get in a charity shop, it really did make me realise, okay, actually nobody cares if I wear the same thing again and again. It's done. So that was a big part of it as well. Yeah, and I think also just forcing you to be more creative. So I realised how much I loved that challenge of taking a step off the trend treadmill and just thinking, well, what do I actually love? What colours and prints and fabrics appeal to me? And often it would be stuff that isn't on trend, and that becomes irrelevant. Like I know there are certain shapes and certain eras that I gravitate towards. There are certain colours and prints that will always make me happy, whether or not they're deemed fashionable. So I think that really helped as well with the self-talk and seeing the other side of things, definitely.
You talked about how the things that were really good quality in the charity shop were often the oldest things, and the fact that you'd often, when you were pricing them, priced them a little above the brand new high street items because they actually were better made, they'd lasted longer and would continue to last. So that's another really telling sign of, what fast fashion is. It is kind of this throwaway thing that people that doesn't last, and it's ending up in charity.
Yeah, completely. No, it's so true, actually. The things that people get really excited about in charity shops are the hand knitted jumpers, or really good sturdy stuff from the 70s, lovely kind of wool blazers and things that are made from natural fibers, things that maybe have even been handmade. That is the stuff that is really coveted, actually, and often it will be the things that looked really hot in the window of Zara 6 months ago are languishing on the rails because people are already bored of them. Yeah, it's a big lesson to be learned.
In your book, you talk to someone called Dr. Dion Terrelong, who's a clinical psychologist, who's an expert on mental well-being and what we wear. I was very fascinated. I wondered if you could share your insights from the conversation.
Yeah, I absolutely love Dion. She's fantastic. I think we need more people actually focusing on that cognitive side of fashion, because that was one thing I knew when I sat down to write the book, was that I didn't just want to focus on the problems and the reasons that we should be breaking up with fast fashion, because many people have done that already. There's so many academics and activists out there who are really fighting that fight. But what I wanted to do was find another way in as well, which I think is talking about that more personal and emotional relationship we have with our clothes. And Dion's brilliant because she is also she's a clinical psychologist and she's a stylist. And she works a lot with people who are going through sort of life transitions. So maybe a big breakup, or perhaps they've got a new job, or they've lost a job, or they've made a huge decision and changed their life somehow. And often the way that manifests is that they do want to readdress the way that they get dressed in the mornings. And that goes back to what I was saying before about our clothes being something we use to project who we are onto the world. And she was very refreshing, because one of the first things she taught me was that there is a process called habituation, which essentially means the way that the human brain gets used to something means we stop seeing it as a sort of sense of novelty. And therefore that kind of micro hit of dopamine that we are used to getting when we, have a notification on our phones, when we buy something, every time you kind of hand over your card at the till or click add to basket, you're getting that little rush. And what happens is we do get bored of things quite quickly. And of course, that is exacerbated so much by all the things we've been talking about, by the media, by the way the industry is constantly pushing new products on us. But it is also a little bit of an innate thing. And I found that really reassuring when she said that, because I was like, oh, okay, so it's not just that I'm a terrible person, and it's not just that the fashion industry has kind of completely messed up our brains. It is a natural thing to get a little bit bored of your clothes. But what she then went on to say is that the way to cure that is not to rush out and buy new clothes every time, because what happens then is, of course, our brain just gets stuck in that feedback loop where it, will get bored faster and faster, and it will need that fix of new clothes more and more often. But what she recommends instead is rediscovering how to style, which is something that I think we've forgotten, because fast fashion has made clothing so immediate that we can just go out and buy a new outfit rather than kind of putting a jumper on over a dress and then looks different, or styling things differently, so all of those little tricks that we used to learn growing up reading, like, I don't know, Jackie magazine and Bliss and Sugar and those kind of things, we've lost sight of how to do them. So a big part for me of my journey, and also of writing the book, was getting into, okay, how do you keep that relationship with your clothes going? How do you kind of still love your clothes after a year or 5 years or 10 years? And I think that is one of the things she taught me, is definitely it's about shaking things up. So learn how to style, put on a different belt, layer up, knitwear over things, put long sleeved tops underneath a summery dress, try them with tights and boots. You know, sounds really obvious, but a lot of the time we don't do it. So that was brilliant. And yeah, no, she's just been fascinating. Like, I talked to her recently about how the pandemic might have changed our shopping habits as well. And she was saying that for a lot of people, we will have gone one of two ways. So a lot of people have broken out of that feedback loop because we haven't been able to shop. You know, in lockdown, shops were shut. We didn't have any reason to buy new clothes. So for a lot of people, they've learned different ways of kind of self-soothing. So maybe when they used to be feeling, you know, if they felt stressed or insecure, like, you know, I did, we would run out and buy a new outfit. But actually in lockdown, we've learned other ways of getting that little dopamine hit. So we, you know, have a bath, go for a walk, read a book, phone a friend, do a jigsaw, whatever. So that has meant that a lot of people have stopped shopping as much, but also some people have gone the other way and really have just sought that sense of any novelty, any comfort, any tiny little reward. So I think it's just about understanding the way that our brains work. And once you start to unpick that, it makes it a lot easier to change your habits.
Yeah, absolutely. It's spot on. I mean, it's taking the impulse to buy and recognizing it and saying, okay, no, you are going to be honoured today. And taking that impulse and thinking, okay, what can I do with my wardrobe? What can I do with my things? How do I layer up? I mean, yes, there's been a huge spike in sales of luxury and non-luxury sweatpants and, you know, all that kind of thing. ASOS quadrupled their sales, and there's leisure wear companies taking off here, there, and everywhere. But it has allowed us to slow down, take care of our houseplants, do a jigsaw, and I think it's been perfect really to take the time to do that, and with your book as a companion really, because you detail throughout how to think things. So starting off with that impulse to change your styling, and also just how you talk to yourself, as we've mentioned before. You had a big epiphany around dresses, as I recall, that there was a particular kind of dress that you always seemed to go for, and that you realized that it was your sort of go-to feedback loop.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of people do that with their shopping, where you end up just buying versions of the same thing again and again. And obviously for some people, I guess if you're like a uniform dresser and you know that you kind of just love to wear a certain type of trouser and a certain type of roll neck jumper, and that's your kind of uniform, then it's not necessarily a negative thing. But yeah, for me, I was just constantly going for like the it dress, you know, particularly seeing people kind of in things on Instagram, and they never really made me happy after a few weeks, you know. And yeah, there was certainly kind of an element where I had to really talk to myself, and I kind of try and imagine the advice I give to friends, because quite often I will end up with my WhatsApp full of people saying, do I want to buy this thing? You know, people will send me kind of shopping links. And so often I'll say to friends, well, the reason you want that is because it looks like about 5 things you already own. And we do often get stuck in those kind of ruts. And I think also what you were saying earlier about sort of scarcity mindset, so that hunter-gatherer thing, you know, we almost tell ourselves, well, if I don't buy this dress, there will never be another one. You know, what if this is my last chance to get this dress? And so realizing that actually that's not the way fashion works, there will always be another one, is quite a helpful kind of break as well.
Once you've explored all of those sort of those first impulses and stopping yourself shopping, you also then reconnected with your clothes, didn't you? So that was it. So you had your, oh gosh, I buy that dress all the time moment, but then you were actually, okay, I've got this. And you told me about how you used to rehem things very quickly with, you know, before you ran out, or you got into fixing things. But you also wrote something called Solid Tips to Shop By, and to keep a list of the gaps in your wardrobe. So when you have assessed what's missing, you kind of keep that in mind and only go for that. And that was where I thought, oh, that's a sort of real save your wardrobe kind of moment. And we also talked about how scrolling for newness could also be swapped for scrolling for what you actually have.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's such a, I mean, it's why I absolutely love the idea of Save Your Wardrobe, because when you told me about it, I was like, it's like Clueless, but real, which is my dream, because I think that Yeah, almost making it a game. So something that I found that I started to do a bit more over the course of that year and still do is almost think of it in terms of kind of racking up points when I rewear things. So, you know, the kind of standard guideline that a lot of people use is the 30 wears rule, which was invented by Livia Firth from Eco Age. And obviously more than 30 wears is even better, but you know, as a good solid benchmark, I always tell people, when you are pondering whether or not to buy something, always think to yourself, will I wear this at least 30 times? And if the answer is no, maybe don't buy it. That probably means that you don't want it enough. Or it's, you know, it's not going to serve its role in your wardrobe. And I think it's the same with what you already own. So I try and think to myself, you know, how many times have I worn this? And I will kind of go back through. My aim is to get to the point where I cannot remember, because I've worn something so much. And, you know, I was saying to you earlier, I think that almost kind of what apps like Save Your Wardrobe can do really well is kind of gamifying that idea of getting the most from your wardrobe, so it becomes fun and it becomes joyful and it becomes about actually showing those items some love. And I am madly sentimental, so you know, this is maybe a bit beyond some people, but I do almost feel guilty if I don't wear my clothes enough, because I imagine them having a little soul and a little personality, which sounds daft. But then if we think about who made those clothes, they do have a soul and they do have a life and a story and a history. And I think that one of the best ways that you can honour those clothes, even if they are fast fashion, even if they were made in a really toxic way, the best way that we can honour those garment workers is by wearing those clothes as much as we possibly can, you know, really rack up those wears. So yeah, every time that I put something on that I've, you know, maybe haven't worn for a little while, or I find a new way to style it, I almost hear that kind of Super Mario power up mushroom noise, you know, it's like da-ding. And I know people that take it further and they actually do keep a tally of how often they wear everything. And I think that, you know, if you've got a digital tool that can actually help you look at your wardrobe and do that, that's, you know, even better, isn't it?
Kind of priceless, and it makes it fun. You also talked about, I mean, I was just, when you were talking about clothes having soul, it's so true. I mean, I the only comparison, I mean, obviously I feel that with all my clothes, and in fact I found my Ziggy Stardust jump, which is really old, that I've rediscovered this week, which is really fun. But it's like with my son's toys, you imagine they've all got personalities, and it's not such a great leap to feel the same thing about the clothes, the people that have made them, and the planet that supplied those materials, and on it goes. You know, you also talked a lot about, you know, just giving your clothes, you know, making that connection by repairing it, maintaining it, giving it a nice hanger, giving it a little airing, builds a little bit of an emotional relationship. So, oh, hello again, nice, you know, doing that kind of thing, which I know that you do a little bit, don't you?
I do, yeah. I do think that is something I've really learned to do better. So even as simple as hanging things up properly. So I actually, it kind of completely coincided with my New Year's resolution, was that I got some like flat velvet hangers that, you know, are non-slip, and because we'd just moved into a new flat as well, and rather than wardrobes, I have a clothes rail, which actually has made a massive difference, because it means that instead of just shoving all my clothes away, I am confronted with them every morning. It means that I'm forced to keep them relatively tidy because they're out in the open. It means that every time I'm having a meltdown in the morning, I look up and I'm like, I do have clothes. You know, and you think you have nothing to wear. I can look up and be like, no, I clearly do, because there is all the evidence to the contrary. And look, they're very pretty and they're nice colours and prints. And, you know, aren't I lucky to have those clothes? So that helps. Looking after them properly, so yeah, washing things properly or not washing them as often, because of course that is actually, you know, I think a lot of people don't realize that one of the biggest causes of like environmental damage from our wardrobes is actually the way that we wash our clothes. So I think it's maybe the third biggest contributor to the carbon footprint. I'm sure I've read that, I need to memorize these facts, but yeah, so actually washing stuff less often, or, you know, giving it an air dry, giving it a little spritz of a sort of freshener, rather than just bunging it in the washing machine every time. You know, kind of really learning how to like get out stains properly. So one of my favorite tips in the book is the old talcum powder trick. If you ever spill anything oily on clothes, talcum powder or dry shampoo or bicarbonate of soda or corn flour. So anything that's got that property. Yeah. stick that on it for as long as you can, and then eventually, you know, brush it off, give it a wash, and then it should be fine. So all of those tricks really going back to what my mother and my grandmother, you know, grew up learning. And yeah, so sewing things as well. Like I'm not a brilliant seamstress. I have some basic skills. I did GCSE textiles long ago. But you know, if you look close up at all of my hems, they're all a little bit ropey. They've probably got the wrong colour thread. But I learned that nobody cares. You know, nobody notices. The most important thing is just getting it worn. And I do think that once you invested a bit of that time and energy in something, then you create that emotional connection, and then you are so much more likely to keep wearing it, to keep loving it, not to get bored of it, whether it's on trend or not. Yeah, it all feeds into that same relationship.
And it all, yeah, exactly. And it builds a relationship, which is wonderful. Now we thought that we'd ask you, you know, fashion and the fashion design industry quite responsible for a lot of the dialogue and the problems, or as well as of the industry itself. If you could do anything to change it, what would you do? How would you do it?
Wow, I mean, gosh, where to start? I think I want legislation, so I would actually go to the governments. I think so. There was a huge inquiry by the Environmental Audit Committee that happened last year, where they made 18 really brilliant proposals for quite small changes, but that would have had a big impact on the environmental cost of fashion, and the government rejected every single proposal. Even really simple things like a 1p kind of levy on fast fashion, tax discounts for repairing companies, things like that, rejected them all. So it's an uphill battle. I think, you know, we are really struggling to get the government to actually pay attention and take it seriously. I would love to see resale and repair happen as standard alongside selling new stuff. I think that is a massive difference. Something that can make a massive difference, particularly to high street. So I always imagine in the future we'll go into a clothes shop and we will have an option of buying something brand new, something that's maybe a year or two old, that has been worn and loved and brought back again and maybe kind of repaired and treated. We will have the option of going to another bit of the store and taking something in to be repaired. I really want to see that like a really holistic thing that all happens under one umbrella. And I think that brands should be forced to take responsibility for what happens to their clothes after the point of sale. So I think that brands should have to offer repairs. I mean, it's happened. I don't know if I've tried it with fashion, but with things like I have, you know, a hairstyler, like a Babyliss hairstyler, and it broke. And I messaged them saying, would you repair this for me? Like I'll pay, but can you repair it so I don't have to just buy a new one? And they just couldn't even understand the question. You know, they just sort of couldn't get their heads around it. So I would really love to see that happen with fashion. I think that, you know, brands, we are starting to see that. It is happening a little bit more, but I want to see brands being held responsible for what happens after their clothes. And that means making things that last. Absolutely. And guaranteeing them. You know, if they fall apart in the wash after 3 wears, then that's not good enough.
That is the one. That is exactly what should happen. Thank you for that. Now we're just about to go to Q&A, but I just wanted you to share the story of your dress that you're wearing before we do that. Because it really represents your new approach to having new things, and how long you waited for it, and how you chose it. And I just thought it would be a lovely way to end if we could hear that story, and then we'll go to questions.
Yeah, so this is actually the first brand new thing that I have bought, and I only bought this, a month, 5 weeks ago. So I made it this far through the year after my shopping ban.
That's 1.5 years of more than 1.5 years of no shopping. Wow.
Yeah, so I just didn't have the urge. I thought that honestly the clock would strike midnight on January the 1st, 2020, and I would be straight on there buying new stuff. But I found that actually the urge just kind of went away, and I was satisfied with secondhand. And the thrill of the hunt, as you were saying earlier, that idea of putting some time into finding the perfect thing, that actually far outweighs the joy of buying something on a whim now. So for me, it's like I have to put in that time and really prove to myself that I want something, and that it will work hard in my wardrobe. And actually, one of the things you and I have chatted about before is learning that difference between liking something and wanting it and needing it. And all too often we tell ourselves we need something when actually what we mean is just I want it, or it's nice, you know, and 2 days later we potentially wouldn't want it as much. It's just like a passing thing. So yeah, so navigating all of that has been a big kind of process. But this dress is by a company called Pink City Prints, who work with artisans in Jaipur, which is a city in India that is famed for having, you know, a really gorgeous print textile industry. And so everything is handmade. It's organic cotton, which means that it's been grown without pesticides, without fertilizers, in a way that is fair to the farmers, without, you know, the gross amounts of water that are used to make most cotton. And it's made to order, pre-order, so I had to wait for it, which I think is a really good thing. And that's another thing I think we need to see more and more brands doing, is that idea of only making what is on demand. And then, you know, we have to sort of be patient. And I think if you're not prepared to wait for 4 weeks to kind of get something, then you probably don't want it enough. And it was quite novel, actually, that experience of waiting for something and really kind of getting excited. And then when it finally arrived, I was thrilled. And honestly, if I'm being really honest, there is still part of me that's a bit like, well, this is quite trend led. Obviously, it's got this ridiculous, massive collar. I will endeavour, obviously, to give this the love that it deserves, to wear it at least 30 times. I have already probably worn it at least 10, I think, and I've only had it about 2 weeks. No, that can't be right. But almost, I'm getting there. I've really racked it up. And I'm going to wear it with tank tops layered over it. I've got cardigans that will go with it. It's cotton, so I can wear it in the height of summer. I can wear it with tights and knits in the winter. But also I was thinking, well, if it gets to a point where this collar suddenly starts feeling ridiculous, maybe I will take the collar off and then, you know, change it up, kind of give it a new life that way.
That you could layer it.
Exactly, could layer it up. Yeah, definitely. And it could also be a real learning curve, because maybe I'll get 6 months down the line and I'll realise that it was a little bit too trend led, and maybe you know, if I haven't worn it enough, that could still be a really interesting exercise. But I hopefully won't feel that way. I think I'm quite committed to it, and it's a really lovely brand. So
it looks beautiful on you.
Thank you very much.
Very, very lovely. Now, Lauren, thank you for all that. It's so insightful, so much to learn, and we've got questions actually coming in. So I'll scroll up the questions quickly now. Hannah Kirby, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question? Is she there, or shall I ask it for you? Maybe I'll ask it for her. Okay, so Hannah, her question is, do you think rental is a legit solution for fast fashion? It doesn't tackle the psychological issue of wanting newness, but it could become more normalized for future consumers.
Yes, I mean, that is such a good question. I think you've really nailed it there. I think that rental is a solution. And I definitely have had the same thoughts. I think, you know, obviously we've seen a massive boom in rental this year, which is in one way really encouraging. It's obviously kind of giving people a more sustainable way to get that trend fix. But what it isn't doing is tackling that root of the problem, which of course is that idea that we need constant newness. I mean, I'm a realist, you know, I think that trends are not going to go away overnight. I think that to some extent, it's kind of human nature to crave newness. As I was saying, you know, we do tend to get bored of things. I think if we can shift a lot of those real hardcore fashion consumers onto rental, then I think that could make a massive difference. What I also really love is the rental brands that are focusing more on peer-to-peer rental. And I think that that is the future. So you have some rental brands who are buying in stock and then renting it out. And then my question is always, well, what happens when those things aren't hot anymore? You know, and often it's that they sell them on at a discounted price, which is fine, but you know, it doesn't feel like it's really changing things too dramatically. But what we also have are rental companies who work a little bit more like Airbnb for fashion. And so that's much more based on a local level. It's about finding people who are in your area, who are lending stuff out from their own wardrobes. And so I work with, there's an app called NUW, which I really love, that does that. So they're very much focused on what's in people's wardrobes, you know, sharing clothes, and they have a swapping feature as well. And I think that is where I really see the future going. I think that idea of making our wardrobes open source, and, you know, we do it on a small level with our friends, don't we? If you've got an event or a wedding or something coming up in the before times, And rather than going out and buying that clutch bag or that pastel coloured blazer that you're never going to wear again, just getting on WhatsApp and saying, okay, who can lend me something? You know, I think we need to get more comfortable doing that. So any kind of companies that are extending that kind of behaviour, I can get behind. But yeah, I don't think rental is the only solution. I think we need to be quite careful, but I do think it's a positive step.
Thank you, Lauren. Yeah, I agree. I think the whole idea of peer-to-peer, you know, if we've got our wardrobes most of the time not doing anything, it's good to get them to get their 30 wears, not just with the owner. The second question we have is from Joanne Church. Do you think shops like Oliver Bonus, Monsoon and Accessorize is bringing out a new collection every 6 months or to a year is a good idea? I.e.
Is that as opposed to people bringing out a new collection kind of every couple of weeks?
Yes, that's what I was trying to get at.
I would say it's definitely better. You know, it is definitely better. Oliver Bonus are an interesting one because I don't know, I've never been able to find any sort of sustainability stats on them. I would imagine if they were doing brilliant things and paying workers a living wage and using, you know, sort of renewable fabrics, they would probably be shouting about it. So that makes me assume they're probably not. But at the same time, I think you're right that if brands are kind of releasing collections on a much slower pace, that's definitely good. I think that's positive. And I think that one of the interesting things that those kind of brands that do tend to have really loyal followings, you know, people love Oliver Bonus. Like I've bought so many presents, birthday presents, gift cards and things there. I think they're in a position where what they could do is actually be the beacons of change there and actually decide that they are going to go down a more sustainable route. Whether we're seeing that yet, I'm not sure. And I worry, I think particularly brands that are in railway stations, they actually do thrive on those last minute impulse purchases. You know, I think a lot of the time it is people who are buying because they're a little bit bored or because they're killing time, rather than necessarily because it's something that they really want. But yeah, I think it's hard to say. I would say definitely better than the really high turnover brands. Absolutely. But I'd like to see them doing a bit more and being a lot more transparent.
I've just checked their Good on You rating.
Oh.
Good on You is, Good on You. So it's a rating app, and they are labeled "We Avoid."
Oh, there we go. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's not buy from Oliver Bonus anymore.
That is a shame. Yeah.
Darn it, there goes the Christmas list.
Yeah, I think often with those brands, because they're a little bit more expensive as well, they tend to get a free pass. You know, people assume that because they're spending more money, that it's going to have been made in a fairer kind of way, and that is just not the case. A lot of the time, actually, some of the more premium brands can be just as bad, if not worse, than what we think of as the worst offenders. Yeah.
I have a question from Megan Hagel, and I'm not sure whether Megan is asking, this is the question: what's your best advice for someone starting out in their sustainable fashion journey but on a smaller budget? But that question, in a way, you didn't spend anything, did you? So in a way, it was quite...
Yeah. Well, that is the thing. So I think price accessibility is a really important topic in the sustainable world at the moment, and it's long overdue, because for a long time, all we had really, if you wanted to be more sustainable, was very expensive kind of beige clothes, and it's changed a lot even just in the time since I wrote the book, in that there are so many kind of more excited and more varied sustainable brands coming through. It's a tricky one because, of course, clothes have to cost a certain amount in order to make sure that no one's being exploited. And so, when we talk about fast fashion being democratizing, that is actually an illusion, because of course the very poorest people in the world are the ones that are paying the price for us to feel like fashion is more accessible. But that said, as you say, Melanie, the most sustainable thing we can do is buy less, which doesn't cost anything. Obviously, people still need clothes, and particularly if you have young children and things like that, you need to clothe them. So I don't believe in ever kind of making anyone feel bad for doing what they need to do to kind of get by and live their lives. But I would say secondhand, if you are able to buy secondhand, of course it is harder to find like bigger sizes in secondhand, so again there is another accessibility issue there. But by and large, for most people, secondhand is one of the best ways to go. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to buy from a charity shop. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to buy vintage. Certainly doesn't mean that you have to look like a retro throwback, although that is something I personally enjoy. But actually, you know, using eBay, using Depop, you could often find things that are, again, brand new with the tag still on. Maybe they've been worn 3 times. They are half the price or even less of buying those clothes new. So that's always a really good place to start, I think. Like I was saying, swapping and sharing clothes, I really think that's the future. And that, again, doesn't cost anything. So, you know, maybe organising, obviously COVID safe, but in the future, organising clothes swaps with friends in a neighbourhood. Around where I live in East London, we have an amazing thing called the Jumble Trail, which happens every year, where people put stalls outside their houses and you go around and buy things for people. I think we need to see a lot more of that happening, which makes it a lot more accessible. And also, I guess, realising that, you know, sustainable clothes should be a lot better quality. They should last you a lot longer. So saving up to buy one special thing and then just wearing it and wearing it and wearing it is one of the best things that we can do. But I know it's a big mindset leap, and I'm not even there myself yet, so I can't kind of preach to other people.
Thank you, Lauren. We've kind of run over slightly. There was no. I mean, somebody called Tom Meggle had a good question, but then he had to go, so I'm going to leave his question.
Sorry, Tom.
It's recorded, so that's fine. He will watch it later.
Yes, okay. So there was somebody called Jenny Barrett who just mentioned that she rents pre-loved baby clothes with a company called Superloop, that sounds interesting. Tom Meggle's question was, where is it? If you were the CEO of LVMH for one day, what one decision would you take to implement circularity in the group's offer? It's quite an interesting one.
Wow, I don't know if I'm quite qualified to answer that, I have to say. I think it would take longer than a day to implement circularity. I think if I was CEO, the first thing I would do is probably go and pay garment workers more, I think.
I've got an idea.
Yeah, go on, you tell me while I think about this.
It's just for them to continually buy back anything that they are seeing in the marketplace, and then be able to not just sell their current seasons, but to continually sell all of their seasons all the time.
Absolutely. So I was reading something the other day about the idea of pre-vintage, and how in the future we won't think of sort of end-of-line stock and unsold stock as dead stock or something that's undesirable. We will think of it as pre-vintage, which is that it is, you know, it has a future, it has a desirability built into it. And yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I would say maybe even just put a freeze on designing anything new, because I think that is the thing that all brands, whether they're fast fashion or premium, need to really, really do, is scale back production. And so potentially, yeah, just freezing that process and saying, okay, what we're actually going to do is put all of our staffing and our resources and our energy into using everything that is out there already, whether that's sitting in our warehouses or whether that's sitting in people's wardrobes.
Well, exactly. I mean, if you think that Burberry burned £28 million worth of clothes 2 years ago, just imagine how many millions of pounds or billions worth of clothes went unsold this year, and they could fill the shops for years. Probably.
Yeah, and brands are still getting away with burning them. It's just that Burberry were the ones that got called out for it.
Yeah. So a good decision that I think Gucci, but it's from a competitive group, did, is to go out from the Milan Fashion Week calendar and to drop collection whenever they feel like they are ready, and not at a frequent rate. And it goes back to how Azzedine Alaya, you know, the Alaya, the big couturier back then, he refused to be part of any calendar because he thought that it didn't have to follow any type of frequency, but just when he feels like his timeless collection would be ready, that's when they will push for it. So it's not extremely circular, but it could be a first step.
I agree. The fashion system is mad, really, truly mad. There was a brilliant quote from Marc Jacobs earlier in the year, just like, why are we doing this? Like, I'm doing pre-collection and this collection. It's like, you know, it's almost, you know, the designers are as tired of it as we are. So, okay, I'm just going to check if there's any more questions. This has been such an incredible session. Lauren, you've got so much wisdom, honestly.
I'm still learning. I mean, gosh, there's so much I still don't know.
It's an ever-changing space. It's where, it's an ever-changing thing, and it's where the future lies for the fashion industry. They have to change. There was a question about, this I think we'll end with this one. Do you think shopping behaviours and habits change in stores versus online? Because you described yourself running around stores as well as you're scrolling.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, one of the first tips that I give people when they want to sort of break up with fast fashion, change that habit, is curating their digital presence. So I think, that means unsubscribing from all of those mailing lists. Yeah. And it is like playing a game of digital whack-a-mole. Like, you think you've got them all, and then more pop up in your inbox that you don't ever remember signing up to. Also going through your social media feeds, because I think that is one of the biggest things. I think, particularly for kind of my generation, the biggest thing pushing us to shop is that perpetual scroll, constantly seeing new outfits, constantly being fed that idea of a must-have. So I really urge people to unfollow all of the kind of influencers and brands that compel them to buy stuff online. I think with online as well, there is that phenomenon, isn't there, of kind of running around the internet, leaving things in baskets, because you get a little bit of a rush even from just clicking add to basket, even without buying it, And of course, it doesn't take any physical energy. And so while obviously online shopping has in many ways been a really brilliant thing, it's much more accessible. It means that people who don't have the time or the physical ability to go shopping can access what they need. That is great. But it also means that because we're not required to actually put in any legwork, it just makes it too easy, And I would often buy things in the middle of the night if I was bored. Sometimes I would I remember a couple of times I had bought an item before I'd even lifted my head off the pillow in the morning. I would wake up, grope for my phone, and then just be sort of scrolling Instagram mindlessly. Oh, there's a nice dress. And yeah, I think it is that ease. And I'm not saying that shopping should be an obstacle course where we are, obliged to sort of walk through fire and climb over a hill or something to get to it. But I think when you had to actually put a little bit of work in, a little bit of time, it does make a difference. Yeah, so I think online we have to just be very careful about how easy it makes it.
Yeah, I was just about to agree on how frictionless online could be, and and actually the whole 2000 was about to reduce friction and to remove any barrier or challenge between the customer and the seller. And again, to come back to the University of Glasgow feedback, we've got many people actually said that they want friction back. They want to feel that there is a small effort towards, or investment of time and energy towards the purchases or past purchases they are making. And that's also something that proves that behavior change, that there is a change in behaviors when it comes to shopping or when it comes to consuming. And yeah, it's a feedback that shows that people are tired of over consuming and of being overwhelmed or overstimulated with new things, and waiting for things is actually, there's a virtue in that.
Yeah, I think that's so great to hear, and I do think it makes sense that people are actually going, hang on, I would rather have a relationship with this garment. I'd rather have put in like a bit of effort, whether that is being patient and waiting for it, having it repaired, altering it themselves, having a dress up session with it. All of that, I think really helps us kind of love our clothes for longer.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, this has been a wonderful chat. So many great things have come up. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Hasna.
Pleasure. Thank you, Melanie.
It's a pleasure. And yeah.